Jungkook entered the living room with his cold, powerful expression, but something flickered in his eyes, regret. The moment one saw him walking towards her, she flinched, her body trembling uncontrollably. Her chest tightened, fear mixing with confusion. She didn't know what was about to happen. Jungkook stepped closer, each foot was heavy and deliberate. Instinctively, Wan backed away, her gaze dropping to the floor. Her hands twisted nervously in front of her, trying to hide her trembling. Then, in a low voice of his usual sharpness, Jungkook spoke. "I'm sorry." Wan's breath hissed. She looked up for a second, startled, only to see his head lowered. With a deeper sigh, he said again, slower this time. "I'm sorry for blaming you for something you never did." Gasps rippled through the hall. The maid and his man exchanged stunned glances, unable to believe their eyes. The Mafia king, the man who never bent his pride, who never bowed to his head, apologized to anyone, was standing before a mere maid, his head lowered in regret. One's heart squeezed painfully. The sound of his voice gave her some strange relief, but at the same time it hurt. Mrs. June, who had been watching silently, stepped forward, placed a gentle hand on One's back, patting her softly. "See, Jungkook," she said firmly, through a warmth. "I told you, she's not type of girl. She would never do something like that." Jungkook lifted her gaze, then locked his dark, guilt-ridden eyes on Wan. His voice was quieter than before, almost pleading. "Please forgive me." Wan's steady eyes lifted to meet his for a moment, but no words came. After a few seconds of silence, she turned her gaze to Mrs. Jeon instead and whispered shakily, "Ma'am, may I take my leave for today, please?" Mrs. Jeon, seeing her state Wan was in, gave her a kind nod. "Yes, of course, dear. It's okay, go and get some rest." Jungkook remained silent, his eyes fixed on Wan as if trying to hold her there, but she didn't look at him again. With trembling legs and bowed head, she moved past them, her figure fragile and small. Jungkook stayed where he was, shoulder tense, watching her retreat, his jaw clenched, guilt heavy, his eyes never leaving her until she disappeared from sight. That night Wan stood in the kitchen preparing dinner for her stepmom as usual, but her mind was somewhere else, on the morning incident at the Jeon mansion, on how Jungkook had blamed her for something she hadn't done. All her life people had blamed her for things she hadn't done. Tonight it stung more than ever. She didn't want to go back to that job. She wanted to leave, but if she left, she couldn't pay her tuition. Without tuition, she couldn't finish her studies or escape this house, her stepmom, this nightmare she had lived in for years. Lost in thoughts, she didn't notice a glass sitting on the edge of the counter. Her fingers slipped. The glass fell and shattered across the tiles. Her heart leaped for throat, and her hands began trembling uncontrollably. The sound echoed through the house. Her stepmom came running into the kitchen. When she saw the broken glass, she turned to Wan, eyes hard. Wan stumbled back, shaking with fear, tears spreading to her eyes. "You broke my expensive glass. Do you know how much that cost?" "I'm sorry, I didn't notice," Wan stammered, her voice trembling. "You can't even do a simple thing properly." Wan stood frozen. Her whole body shook. It was morning again. Wine was working in the kitchen at June Mansion, just like always. While she was quietly focused on her chores, one of the maids walked over and said, Wine, take this coffee to Mr. June. He wants it. Wine looked up, her brow frowning. Me? She asked, her voice trembling. The maid nodded firmly. Yes, he wants you to give this coffee to him. Wine's heart began to race. She didn't want this. She didn't want to face Jungkook. She quickly shook her head and stammered, Can't you take it to him? I'm actually busy. I'm still finishing this. But the maid only shook her head. No, he especially asked for you. I can't. One shallowed her. Her chest tightened with nerves. She hesitated for a moment, then finally took a deep breath, reached for the tray with trembling hands, and nodded softly. Wan's heart pounded as she walked towards Jungkook's room. The last time she had stepped inside, it hadn't gone well. Now she was being forced to face him again. Fear wrapped tightly around her chest, making it hard to breathe. She clutched the coffee cup with trembling hands and softly knocked on the door. From the other side, a low, husky voice echoed, Come in. Wan took a shaky breath, her palms sweating, and pushed the door open. Jungkook sat on the sofa, his laptop on his lap. He didn't look up right away. Wan quickly lowered her gaze and walked towards the table. With careful, trembling hands, she placed the cup down. Your coffee, sir, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Only then Jungkook lifted his eyes to her. There was something different in them today. Not the icy sharpness she was used to, but a flicker of guilt, almost softness. One bowed slightly and turned to leave, her heart desperate to escape. But then, wait! The word rolled out of his husky voice, commanding and heavy. One froze mid-step, slowly turned back. Jungkook already stood up from the sofa, his tall frame closing the distance between them. Instinctively she stepped back, but he advanced until his towering figure hovered over her trembling ones. His voice dropped, softer than she had ever heard. I'm sorry for yesterday again. Wan's eyes lifted slightly, meeting his gaze, but quickly looked down, silent. After a long pause, she bowed her head again. I'll leave now, sir, she mumbled. But as she turned, Jungkook's hand reached out. His strong fingers wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer against him. Wan flinched at the sudden closeness, her body stiff. His other hand moved to her waist, holding her firmly in place. Her palms grew clammy, her heart racing so fast she thought he might hear it. I know you are hurt, Jungkook said in a low, husky tone, his face close enough for her to feel the warmth of his breath. I shouldn't have blamed you. I should have investigated more, instead of lashing out at you. His jaw tightened as he added, softer this time. I'm sorry. Wan's eyes shimmered, tears threatening to fall. She said nothing, only looked down, her lips trembling. That's when Jungkook noticed it. His brow frowned, his jaw clenching hard. Slowly his hand lifted, brushed up with his thumb. One flinch, startled by his touch, and finally looked up at him. Jungkook's gaze darkened, his voice, when it came, Who did this? Wan's eyes widened. His words sent a shiver down her spine. It's nothing, sir. Wan whispered shakily, trying to step back, but Jungkook didn't release her. Instead, he tightened his grip, his thumb lingering against her cheek. His eyes, piercing into hers, filled with an emotion she couldn't name. His heart ached in a way he didn't understand, but he couldn't bear the thought of someone hurting her. His voice came again, colder this time, edged with when tears finally slipped over. She said, her voice breaking, Just let me go. I didn't bother you for anything, sir. So why are you asking me this? Her words struck something deep in him. His grip on her waist loosened, his hands falling to his side. Wine didn't meet his eyes. Again, she quickly bowed her head, turned, and left the room, her trembling figure retreating through the doorway. Jungkook stood frozen, his jaw tight, chest heaving, his heart twisted painfully at the sight of her fear. Her tears, fear that he planted in her since the very beginning, guilt gone at him. For the first time, regret pressed against his cold heart. With a long, heavy breath, he pulled out his phone. His voice was sharp, commanding. "I want every information about someone," he ordered in a husky tone, and then he hung up, his dark eyes still fixed on the door she had just walked through. It was late at night when Wine finally made her way home, her hands trembling and her heart raced as the fear crawled inside her chest. She was very late, too late, and she knew her stepmom would be already. She hadn't been home to cook dinner. The moment Wine stepped inside, her eyes immediately fell on her stepmom, who sat on the sofa. With shaky leg, Wine entered the house. Her stepmom stood abruptly, stormed towards her, and "Do you see the time? Do you know what time it is?" her stepmom said, Wine's body trembling in fear as her stepmother grabbed her arms. "I gave you roof, shelter, everything, and you? This is how you repay me?" Her stepmother froze. Slowly she turned towards the door. There stood Jungkook, his piercing eyes fixed on her, his powerful aura filling the entire house. Everyone in the city knew him, the Mafia king who held power in the palm of his hand. One froze too, her eyes widening in shock. What is he doing here? Jungkook stepped inside, his men following behind him. His voice cut through the silence. "I'm sure you know me well." Her stepmother's hands began to tremble as she quickly forced a nervous smile and bowed deeply. "Sir, you came here? Did she do something wrong in your house?" she stammered, her fearful eyes darting towards Wine. Wine stood stiff, her body frozen with confusion. "Why is he here? Why now?" Jungkook's sharp gaze shifted from her stepmother to Wine. Then, in a commanding tone, he said, "Pack your things." Wine's heart skipped. "What?" She stared at him, stunned. "You will not stay here. You are coming with me." Jungkook continued, his voice steady and unwielding. Her stepmother blinked in shock, her frown deepening. "Mr. Jeon, why? Why would she go with you? How can—" But Jungkook's voice over hers, colder than ice. "I don't like repeating myself," he said. One looked down, her voice weak and trembling. I can't go with you. How can I?" "Don't question my decision." Jungkook cut her off sharply. "You have 5 minutes. Pack your things and come out." With that he turned and walked out of the house with his men, leaving Wine rooted to a spot. Her mind swirled in chaos. Should I go with him? How can I? Fear and uncertainty twisted inside her chest as she stood frozen. But with trembling step, she went eventually turned towards her room to pack, her heart heavy and confused. As they stepped into the Jeon mansion, Wan's heart felt heavy. She didn't want to be here, not under the same roof as Jeon Jungkook, the man she feared most. His very presence made her nervous, her hands tremble, her breath falter. She, she still remembered his harsh warning the very first day, the coldness in his eyes, the way he had hurt her and blamed her for the things she never did. And yet tonight was different. Tonight he had taken her away from her stepmother's house, away from that living nightmare. A small fragile part of her heart had fluttered at that, a part that she quickly buried, refusing to let it consume her. No, one day I'll pay him back for everything. I won't let myself feel anything for him. As they entered the living room, Mrs. Yoon was sitting with a book in her hand. The moment her eyes landed on them, she frowned, set the book aside, and stood. Dear, what happened? Why are you here? She asked in a gentle voice, laced with concern. Then she turned to Jungkook. What's going on? Jungkook's voice was firm, steady. From now on, she will stay here. Mrs. Jeon frowned deeper. Confused, Jungkook continued, his jaw clenched slightly. She lived with a stepmother. That woman doesn't treat her well. Mrs. Jeon's eyes softened as they fell on Wan. She reached out and caressed her girl's cheek, only to notice before Mrs. Jeon could speak, Jungkook called for a maid. His voice echoed coldly through the hall. Take her to her room. The maid bowed quickly. Jungkook had already arranged a room for Wan, right beside his study. He didn't know why, but something inside him needed her close. He wanted to know she was safe, within his reach. The maid herself was shocked. Wan was a maid just like her, but who dared question Jeon Jungkook's decision? She simply nodded and gestured for Wan to follow her. With hesitant step, Wan left with her maid, her figure slowly disappearing down the hallway. Mrs. Jeon, however, noticed something that Jungkook missed, the way Wan flinched whenever she was near him, the silent fear in her eyes. Once the maid and Wan were gone, Mrs. Jeon quickly walked up to her son, placed a gentle hand on his back, her voice soft and steady. If you want her to trust you, she said, you must show her that you are not like the world she came from. Jungkook remained silent, but her words burst through him. They echoed inside his chest, stirring feelings he had tried to bury. Feelings he could no longer ignore. For the first time, Jungkook admitted to himself he was starting to feel something for her. It was morning. Everyone was seated at the dining table, and the maids, wine included, were serving breakfast. Jungkook's eyes were fixed on Wine, carefully studying her every movement with his cold, piercing gaze. Usually Wine left for university early in the morning, only to return to the mansion after to do the work. Jungkook already knew everything about her schedule from her information, but today was different. Wine stayed at the mansion overnight and thought she would prepare breakfast for everyone. That's when Jungkook's cold voice cut through the silence. Don't you have university today? One froze. The maid serving breakfast also stopped in their track. All eyes turned towards Jungkook. Sit down, he said again, his voice cold, sending a shiver down everyone's spine. All eyes now shifted to Wine. Shock and disbelief were written on the face of the maids. How could Jeon Jungkook tell a maid to sit with them? One felt a weight of attention on her. She didn't like it. Thoughts raced through her mind. What would everyone think of her? Her heart pounded under Jungkook's piercing stare. Mrs. Jung smiled softly but said nothing. She knew Jungkook would handle everything. Then he looked towards another maid and said coldly, "Prepare another plate." The maid immediately obeyed without hesitation, her hands steady. Wan's mind was turmoiled. How could she sit with them? She was just a maid. Was it right for her to sit there and have breakfast? She remained standing, lost in her thoughts. Why did Jungkook do this? Jungkook's gaze returned to her, sharp and piercing. One flinched at the intensity and eventually lowered her eyes, hesitantly taking a seat at the table, a plate of food before her. The food untouched, Jungkook's cold tone cut through the quiet once more. Jungkook's eyes didn't waver, his voice, cold, commanding, cut across the silence. Eat, don't make me repeat myself. A shiver ran down through Spain. With a trembling breath, Wine finally lifted her spoon and began eating breakfast alongside them, her mind still racing with caution and nerves. A few weeks passed like this, with Wine living in the June mansion. In these weeks, under the same roof as Jungkook, she no longer felt the fear she once did. Jungkook made sure she was comfortable around him, yet somehow Wine still grew nervous whenever he was near. His powerful aura always sent shiver down her spine. On the other hand, Jungkook had taken care of all her needs during these weeks, even overseas her studies. Wine even tell him she didn't need that help, but Jungkook never bothered to listen, and strangely, she felt deeply grateful for it. He also made sure he didn't have to do much work in the mansion, without her even realizing it, instructing all the maids and his men not to assign her an exclusive task. Now at night, one stood in the balcony, doing nothing, lost in her thoughts. Jungkook enters silently, unnoticed. He came up beside her, breaking the thought with his deep voice. "What are you thinking so deeply about?" One flinched slightly before noticing him. She no longer felt that fear, but his presence still made her nervous. She didn't know why, but his imposing figure, his strong posture, always made her tremble under his gaze, not from fear. She quickly looked down at the city lights and spoke softly, her voice low and hesitant. "The past few weeks my life has changed. Everything. Everything I never expected, never even imagined or dreamed of." Jungkook's eyes softened just slightly for her, through his cold, aura remained. "And it's all because of you, sir," she continued, her tone barely above a whisper. "You have done so much for me. I don't know if I will ever to able to repay you. But I promise when I complete my studies, I'll pay you back for everything." Jungkook chuckled deeply, the sound sending another shiver down Wine's spine. He started to step closer. "Did I ever tell you that you need to pay me back?" His voice was low, teasing. His body was now hover over hers, hands flaming on either side of railing. Wine's heart raced uncontrollably from the closeness. With a trembling voice, she whispered, unable to meet his gaze, "But I want to pay you back." Jungkook smiled softly, a teasing glint in his voice. "Then you can pay me back in another way." Wine looked up immediately, frown, her voice innocent. "How?" He leaned closer, closing the space between them. One hand instinctively came to her cheek, making her flinch at the sudden warmth. Caressing her softly, the warmth of his skin sending another shiver through her. He leaned even closer, his breath brushing her ears. And in a low, cold voice, he mumbled, "Patience, sweetheart, I'll tell you when the right time comes." One's breath caught at the nickname he gave her, but she forced herself to steady her racing heart, afraid he might hear it. Jungkook pulled back his face slightly, his eyes softened. With a deliberate step, he left the balcony, leaving Wine alone with her swelling thoughts and pounding heartbeats. Days passed by. It was late in the night when one found herself standing in front of Jungkook's bedroom door. Her palms were damp, her heart pounding hard against her ribs. In her trembling hands she carried a small cake she had baked herself. She had learned that today was Jungkook's birthday when Mr. Jeon had wished him in the morning. For months, Jungkook had done everything for her, protected her, cared for her, given her a life she never thought she'd have. So tonight she wanted to do something special for him. But doubt consumed her. Would he like it? Would he think it silly? Taking a shaky breath, Wine softly knocked. From inside, a low, husky voice answered, "Come in." Her fingers curled tighter around the plate. She pushed the door open. The first thing she saw, Jungkook poured back as he stood by the balcony, the dim light washing over his tall frame. Slowly he turned, his sharp gaze falling on her. One step inside, timidly clutching the cake. "Jungkook," she whispered. From that night, Jungkook told her to call him by his name. At first, Wine was confused, but she never dared to question him. Jungkook frowning slightly and stepped back into the room. His eyes immediately fell on the cake in her hands. Wine lowered her gaze and spoke softly, nervously. "Happy birthday. I thought to make you something. I hope you'll like it." Something unspoken flickered in Jungkook's eyes. His chest tightened at her words. Without saying anything, he closed the distance between them, gently taking the cake from her trembling hands and placing it on the table. Wine blinking confused. What is he doing? But before she could ask, Jungkook stepped closer and closer, until the space between them disappeared, his tall frame hovering over her smaller one. His voice was low, husky, and he whispered, "But I want something else from you, sweetheart." Wine's heart skipped every time he called her that name. Her breath hissed. "What?" she asked faintly. Jungkook's strong hands slid on her waist, pulling her against his chest. Wine's eyes widened, but this time she didn't flinch. Her trembling hands instinctively rested on his shoulder. His lips brushed near her ear as he whispered, his voice low and soft. "Do you remember the day you said you wanted to pay me back?" One breath trembled. She nodded ever so slightly. Jungkook pulled back his face, just enough to meet her eyes. His face only inches away, his warm breath mingling with hers. "I want you to be mine, forever, to stay by my side." Once Wall stopped, his words felt like fire and ice all at once, leaving her stunned. Indeed, she had fallen for him, quietly, helplessly. In the months she had lived under his roof, but never had imagined Jungkook confessed her like that. He caressed her cheek with his thumb, his eyes burning with sincerity. He confessed, "I love you." Her lips parted, her voice trembling. "But I'm just a maid. How could you?" Before she could finish, Jungkook silenced her with a kiss. Her eyes widened, her heart thundering so loudly she was sure he could hear it. But then slowly her eyes fluttered shut, and her face clutched at his shirt as she kissed him back. Jungkook smiled faintly against her lips, deepening the kiss, pulling her closer. His hand cupped her cheek as if she were made of glass, while his other arms held her firmly, like she belonged nowhere else but in his embrace. When they finally apart, Jungkook's voice was cold yet laced with an edge that shook her to her core. "Never dare to say that again. You are not just a maid. You are my world." Tears welled in one's eyes. She looked up at him, whispering through her trembling lips, "Thank you for coming into my life. Thank you for everything you have done for me." Jungkook's expression softened into rarest of smile. He wrapped his arms tightly around her, pulling her into his chest. For the first time one could hear the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. Strong, certain, safe. When she finally pulled back, she hesitated. "But your mother?" Jungkook's lip curved into a smirk, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. She already knows, and believe me, she's happier than you. Wine let out a soft chuckle through her tears. That night, in his arms, she was no longer the unwanted maid. She had become his everything.